How many of you guys, this is your first time at the Past Summit? Oh, awesome. Did you guys go to the First Timers event yesterday? Good, good. I will tell you, I first attended, my first Past Summit was in 2003. I have attended every single one since. It changed my life, right? I got to know people, and I had people that I could rely on to contact if there was some problem I was having that I haven't experienced that before. All of a sudden, because of this, I got to know people, and I could talk to them, and it just grew over the years. Now, you know, I mean, I just went to Oslo in Labor Day weekend just to present at their SQL Saturday, and I did a pre-con there. You know, they were after me for a couple of years to come over there, and I had a ball. Oslo's a lovely city, right? So it's that kind of thing that can happen because you're here. It's what Grant was saying in the keynote this morning. Network, network, network. It matters. It really matters, because having people that know things that you don't makes all the difference in the world when you're doing your job. It really does. Speaking of which, there is not a single person in this room that doesn't have some knowledge that the rest of us could learn from. In other words, all of you know things that I don't. The only way we solve that is if you're here and I'm out there. Okay? Two things happen if you share your knowledge. One is I get to learn from you, and that's awesome. The other thing is you get to learn your material, your subject better, because you have to know your subject better to present on it, to teach it, than you do to just do it every day. Okay? So you're going to learn the things you like to do better. You're going to learn them more thoroughly by presenting on them. There are a few other really good things that happen out of that. So let's say you pick something out of what you do every day, and you decide to put a presentation together on that, and you say to your boss, hey boss, can I do a lunch and learn? Generally the boss is going to go, yeah, sure, because that's free training for the rest of the staff, right? So you go into that room and you give that presentation. Now your colleagues have a better understanding of what it is you do and more respect for what you have to go through to get your job done. And your boss, and subsequently the chain going up, learns that you're able to talk about a technical matter in ways that less technical people can understand. That's a hard thing, to get a technical person to explain things in a way that non-technical people can understand. You'll develop that, right? So you do that lunch and learn. And then I'm sure you all have user groups that are local to you. If you don't, start one, please, right? Because we all learn more through user groups. You go to the user group leader and you say, hey, I've got this presentation. Can I do it? And they're going to go, come on down. Because I don't know a user group leader anywhere that isn't always looking for presentation, for presenters, right? So go do your presentation at the user group. Then look on the past website for the upcoming SQL Saturdays that are in your region. And you submit as a speaker to those. You're going to get accepted, right? They want new speakers. Everybody wants new speakers. We want to learn from new people. We're all tired of the same old Alan White talking the same thing over and over again, right? So go to submit to a SQL Saturday. Then you get there and you sit in that speaker room preparing for your session, talking to the other speakers. And we're back to networking again, aren't we? Right? You're building a group of people that become your core for when you have difficulties. You now have people you can contact to help you out, and they will, right? How many of you guys know who Denny Cherry is? Quite a few of you, right? I've called Denny on more than one occasion. Denny and I have been friends for many years, and you know, he's one of the top experts in the field, right? We're buds. We've gotten drunk together. Okay, we won't talk about those stories. But, you know, it's those kinds of relationships that really will help you be far more successful in your career. And it all started by you coming here. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate that. I was on the board of directors for the last 3 years. I stepped down at the end of December this year. So I'm no longer on the board of directors, but I just have such an incredible fondness for this organization because of what it's allowed me to do. I have my own consulting practice, and I get to travel around the world talking about things that I like to do. So, and you can do the same thing. That's my spiel. If you hear me speak again, you'll hear it again. Because it's a strong belief that I have. So we have, what, about 3 minutes before we get started? Still coming in? Excellent. Oh, and I'll talk theater too all day long. I was a theater major when I started college. I realized that wasn't going to make me any money. So I went into data processing. Back then it was called data processing. Remind me if I don't remember to do it. When you ask a question, remind me to repeat the question so the people watching the recording of this will hear the question, because I'll guarantee you they can't hear what you are saying, even though everybody in the room can hear what you're asking. Okay? Thank you. And remind me. So I did a session in Liverpool, and about an hour before my session, I went to test my demos to make sure everything was okay, and my laptop was dead. Absolutely dead. The hard drive died. Completely gone. Fortunately, I had my session material on a USB drive, and one of the guys who used to work for Microsoft at the time, the guy who actually wrote Query Analyzer, Gert Drapers, he loaned me his laptop, right? And I spent like 45 minutes getting everything working. Okay, get in the room, get up there ready to present. And my wife had come with me because I'm Liverpool. She'd never been to Liverpool, right? So she's sitting in the back of the room after I'm pouring sweat trying to get everything put back together again. And I finished my session, and I went to her and I said, "So how'd I do?" She goes, "You said okay 37 times." Really? That's what you came away with? She was an elementary school teacher for 20 years and a principal for another 10 years. So, she has no clue about the technology, but she's a good critic of me. So I'm at 10:15. You guys ready to start, Chris? Yep. We're all good? All right. Let's get going. Are you ready for disaster to strike? Please turn off your cell phones. Okay, I need to do the same thing. Now, mine just vibrates, but I'll tell you what, that vibrating is annoying. All right, so silence your cell phones. There are all kinds of things going on here this week. There are all kinds of things going on all year long. So go to the PASS website regularly. Check out the virtual groups. Check out the 24 hours of PASS options. Check out the SQL Saturdays that are in your region. And sometimes pick a SQL Saturday that's someplace you'd like to go. Take your spouse or your close friends or whomever and go to a SQL Saturday so you can write off the trip and then visit the town while you're there, right? I did the Oslo Pass when I was in Oslo on Labor Day weekend. It's like one price and gets you into all the museums and public transportation too. All right, so all kinds of things, plenty of opportunities for you to volunteer. I've just spent the last few years on the NomCom, and I don't know if you saw that we've got a really excellent slate of candidates for the past board elections this year. All right, a little bit about me. I'm old. I have actually been working in IT for 45 years now. That means 1974 is when I started, and personal computers didn't exist. Okay, so I've been around the block a couple of times. I magically discovered SQL Server, the Sybase version. It was called SQL Server in 1992. I fell in love with it when SQL Server 6.0 came out in 1995. I switched my company's stuff all over to the Microsoft product, and I haven't looked back. It's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. I love working with the database. So that's 27 years working with SQL Server. I was a director for the past board for 3 years. That just ended this past December. And I've done pretty much across the board. Well, I haven't done a lot of web development, and I don't want to. That's just not my game. But I love being a DBA, and I love working with data. So any questions, please? You've got my email address. You've got my LinkedIn connection and my Twitter handle. So please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. All right. Pilots, when they're operating their aircraft, have a checklist for everything. Because, when something goes wrong when you're, 5,000 feet in the air, you can't pull over to the side of the road. There's no road to pull over, right? So you have checklists to handle everything. You should have a checklist of what every one of your servers looks like. What is the operating system? What are the processors in that? How much memory? How much disk? How is that disk configured? How many network cards? Where are they configured? What are the databases on that server, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to start this demo right now because it takes a little time to get started to do, and while the install, I am starting from a reinstalled version of Windows Server 2012 R2, because if you notice on this checklist, this particular server, WS12 SQL, is running Windows Server 2012 R2 data center, and it's running SQL Server 2014 Service Pack 1. So we need to put that back together because we just got hit with ransomware and we lost our servers. Could I have given them money to get my stuff back? Yeah. Would I have gotten my stuff back? Maybe. Would they come at me again? Probably. So, best plan, rebuild. Better plan, be prepared so that you can rebuild. So the first thing I'm going to do is get into a demo and get the reinstallation started. This is a Windows Server 2012 R2 machine that all that's happened is the operating system has been installed and the server has the name of WS12 SQL. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go to my backup folders, and I've got a set of demo scripts. Sometime in the next day or two, I will upload all of these demo scripts so that you can download them, because that way you can kind of follow along. But I'm going to copy these demo scripts to my server. On the C drive, I'm just going to paste those demo folders. And I'm also going to grab, in my work files directory, here is where I have the ISOs for the installation media for Windows Server 2012 and SQL Server 2014. All right, and I also have the service pack here. So I need this, and oh, I don't need this. I just need the service pack and my backup files. And I'm starting this way simply because of the amount of time it takes to install, especially on my Surface Pro. Okay, it's not the most beefy machine. But what I'm going to do here, as soon as the copy is done, these are all my backups. Normally those will be on a network drive accessible to you because I'm working in a standalone virtual machine, I don't have a network drive available to me. So, so I'm copying them directly to the machine. I'm going to open up the Windows PowerShell integrated scripting environment, and the reason I'm doing it this way is because the ISE has this wonderful feature that allows me to make the characters bigger so you can see them. Okay? All right. I'm going to open in my demos folder a script that's there called rebuild steps. This is what we're actually going to do. So I'm going to go to the VM and I'm going to insert the Windows Server 2012 R2 installation media, because the first thing I need to do, if you remember, Windows Server 2012 R2 does not automatically install .NET 3.5. But SQL Server 2014 requires .NET 3.5, and that should be in your checklist, right? So I'm going to add Windows feature, the Net Framework Features option, and that is on the Windows installation disk in the sources/SXS directory. So all I'm doing here is adding .NET 3.5, because if I don't do this, SQL Server won't install. Again, this should be in the checklist so you don't forget it. So that's done. Now I'm going to change the DVD from the Windows Server install to the SQL Server install. There's SQL Server Developer Edition. You should use a production edition. Of course, you use the proper media. And now I'm going to change to that drive, and I'm going to use automated install. How many of you are using automated install for your SQL Server installs? Good. There's a number of you that are. The rest of you, when you do a graphical interface install of SQL Server, when you get to that last page where you say go ahead and install, underneath that tree that shows you everything it's going to do is a path to a configuration file. Save that. Mark it with the name of the machine. Do I have an error? Of course I have an error. Oh, duh, because I didn't build the directory, and I apologize for this. I'm going a little too fast. Okay, so I need to create my setup folder, and I'm going to move this configuration file to my setup folder. Did I just create? Yeah. I'm also going to move this script, and I'll come to this later. I'm going to move this to my work directory, and I'm going to move this file to setup. All right, let's try that again. But by building scripts to automate this stuff and practicing with those scripts to make sure it works, like it's now starting to do, you'll be assured that when an emergency happens, you don't have to think about things. Because the last thing you want to do in an emergency is have to think about things. Right? So our installation is in process. Let's minimize our virtual machine. And get back to our deck. Barry Schiff used to be a pilot for Eastern Airlines. He's retired now, but he still writes a column monthly for the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association magazine. And I'm a member of Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association because I got my pilot's license back in 1998. So just because it was really interesting, and it turned on a whole range of ideas. A lot of what I'm sharing with you today comes directly from my pilot training, which is so parallel with what a DBA has to do. It really does. But Barry wrote this article, and he talked about expectancy bias. You have an expectancy that things are going to be as you expect them to be, right? You expect that those backups you're doing are good. The article that Barry wrote, he was writing about a pilot. When you are coming in to land an airplane and you're on visual flight rules, you fly downwind of the runway so you can make sure that everything is good, that everything's clear. You're literally flying the opposite direction you're going to land, parallel to the runway at an appropriate height, usually about 2,000 feet above the height of the runway. And you go through your landing checklist. You turn to base, which is 90 degrees. You have further checklist items, and then you turn left on the final, and you get that plane configured to put that plane on the ground. What he was writing about was the pilot that was so involved in his checklist that he neglected to notice that there was a plane on the ground as he was on short final getting ready to land the plane. Now, landing on top of a plane is generally a bad idea. Okay? It bends metal, and you don't want to bend metal. It's costly. You know the definition of a good landing, right? It's one you can walk away from. You know the definition of a great landing? You can still use the plane afterwards. Okay? So anyway, so Barry wrote about this. Fortunately, the pilot looked up at the last minute, saw the plane, pulled up, and did a go-around. Okay? So it wasn't the disaster that it could have been. All right? But equating this to backups, how often do you test your backups? Do you know they're good? Right? You have to make sure that those backups are good on a consistent basis. How do we react when a problem occurs? So when a problem happens, the worst thing you can do is jump to any conclusion. You might conclude it's a memory problem. It might be a network problem, right? Look at all of the data rationally. Go through a process to make sure that what is being reported to you as the problem is actually the problem. And then take the appropriate steps. Again, you want to practice those emergency procedures. And this is what pilots do. When I was learning to fly, I spent very little time actually learning to fly the aircraft, because it flies itself. It's designed that way. It wants to keep going in the air. What I was learning was how to deal with emergencies. So what I've got here, up here, is a checklist items from a Cessna 172 mid-engine or an in-flight engine fire, right? Over here, I don't know if you can see that. It's over on the right-hand side. Usually I'm in a SQL set right over there on the right-hand side. Engine fire in flight. There's a set of checklists. You're 5,000 feet in the air in a Cessna 172, which has one engine, and it's on fire. You know, well, the items are, you know, turn off your mix, you know, pull your mixture, make your mixture lean, right? That puts more air in there. The next thing you want to do is shut off the fuel. turn off the master switch, stop getting electrical charge to the engine. Then turn off the boost pump, which is shoving more fuel into the engine. Then you want to turn off the cabin heat. Now, the Cessna 172s, they take that heat generated by the engine and they cycle it into the cabin so you stay warm when you're 9,000 feet in the air, right? So turn that off. And then set your aircraft, pitch your aircraft so that you maintain a 100 knots indicated airspeed, because that gives you your maximum glide in a Cessna 172. So you have enough time to look for a place to put it on the ground safely. And you can not only walk away from it, but you can still use the plane afterwards, right? So, oh, by the way, I was talking about talking, always have water. You will dry out. So what you need to do in your environment is to create a checklist specific to your environment for all of your servers that allow you to recover from whatever problem you might encounter. Specifically, a team I led a few years back, one of the team's customers was using a third-party hosting company for their servers, but somebody in their organization clicked a button on an email, and all of the 21 servers that the company used were automatically infected with ransomware. Gone. Completely gone. The real tragedy of this was that the hosting company did not have accurate records of what servers they had and how those servers were configured. So instead of taking a couple of days to recover those servers, it ended up altogether taking about 3 weeks. The good news is they had good backups off the network, right? So build a checklist of all your servers, practice on a set of test servers using those checklists, and then anytime anything changes, update those checklists, right? Are you ready? Are you prepared? This is the console from a Cessna 172, but you know what everything means. If you don't know what everything means, then you're not ready. Right? So what do we need? We need a system inventory. We need to know what all the servers we manage are. We need to know what disk drives they have and how big those disks are, and we need to know how much memory each server has, what the network cards are, all of those other things. We need to know all of the logins. We need to know all of the agent jobs. Everything about those servers, we need data, right? We need backups. I just showed you in my folder where my ISOs were for the installation media for my recovery systems. Do you know where yours are? And please don't tell me on the network, right? Because on the network is going to get nailed just like everything else is, right? I don't know how many of you guys carry around or have at your disposal USB drives, right? All the ransomware in the world that hits that thing ain't going to hit this, right? Because it's not connected to anything. So have at your disposal, for the people listening online, I'm holding up a USB drive that I carry with me, which, by the way, has that whole presentation on it, just in case something happens to that, because I've had that happen. That wasn't fun. All right, so your operating system, and both Windows and SQL Server installation media, your database backups, all of your database backups so that you can bring yourself back up to current, right? Do you back up your certificates? A lot of people don't even think about that, but you've got, at a minimum, reporting services. You're not going to get reporting services back without the certificate for that, right? But all of the encrypted data that you have in your environment is I would venture to say, protected by certificates, so you need to have those backups, right? Your scripts to recover your logins and all of your agent jobs. do you have a well-defined RTO and RPO? Recovery time objective, recovery point objective, right? Your recovery time objective is how much time will the business give me to restore a server if it goes down, right? Recovery point objective is at how much data am I willing to lose? So if my business is willing to lose 15 minutes of data, you better believe I'm doing transaction log backups every 15 minutes, right? So that's your recovery point objective. What you have to do is define those, get the business to agree to them, and then regularly test the restore with the backups you have to make sure you can still meet the agreed upon RTO and RPO. Because as your business goes, your data is going to grow. It's going to take longer. So you have to continually readjust or find new ways like accelerated data recovery, right? How awesome was that they announced this morning, right? So that you need to have that backup strategy that's going to support the RTO, RPO. You need a resource checklist that defines what your current environment is, gives you information about every one of your servers, so you don't have to ask the question, well, how big was the M drive on, server data 123, and what do I have to reconfigure that? You need to have that at hand when the emergency hits so you can recover that. And you need to update that regularly. Now, I gave this presentation a month ago in Pittsburgh. And one of the and this slide wasn't there. One of the comments I got from one of the attendees of the session was, well, why don't you just restore why don't you just restore like a newer version of the operating system and a newer version of the database, SQL 2016 or, something like that. And it's like, okay, one of the things I learned as a pilot, what that is your airspeed indicator in a Cessna 172. And the white lines, and for those of you colorblind, I apologize for this. This is what you see on an aircraft panel. The white line is the speed that I can travel, that I can make that aircraft go with full flaps, right? On the back of the wings, there's two things. There's ailerons, which allow you to steer, and there's flaps, which allow you to fly slower, right? With full flaps, that white bar tells me how fast I can go. The green bar, without flaps, that tells me how I can go normal operating speed, right? In normal conditions, like you get into moderate turbulence and stuff like that. The yellow bar is the amount of speed I can go when it's smooth air, when I have a really good day, right? And the red line, you can almost not see it there, but that red line says, don't go faster than that, right? Anything beyond those bars, you're a test pilot. That's what I was taught as a student pilot. Anything beyond those bars, you can do it. You're a test pilot. You've gone beyond what the manufacturer certifies that aircraft can do. When you restore, and you have SQL 2014 running in your production shop, and you restore SQL 2016 because, hey, it's available, you're a test pilot. You don't know if the application is going to work the way it was when things went down. Don't be a test pilot. Save that for another time when you can plan the upgrade, okay? So let's restore all the things. Our installation of SQL Server is complete. So we're going to take the next step, and we're going to apply the service pack. So we're going to go into the setup directory on the C drive, and I'm going to execute the script that's going to install Service Pack 1 because that was on my checklist. That's the version level that server was at. While that's working, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my demos directory, and I'm going to show you the output of, and If you go back to a recent 24 Hours Have Passed, I did a full hour session on SQL PowerDoc, written by Kendall Van Dyke, who now works for Microsoft. When he wrote it, he worked for me. I had another consulting practice back then. And what SQL PowerDoc does is it uses a whole set of PowerShell scripts to evaluate both your Windows environment and your SQL Server environment, and pulls back. I've got the machine name, the scan date, the manufacturer, product ID. I see that it's 2012 R2 standard, physical processors, processor cores, logical processors, physical memory. Remember, I ran this against the demo VM, right? Physical memory tells me that, gives me the processor information, tells me my network adapter. Importantly, my disk drives, it shows I've got a single C drive. Okay? So I'd show you another one. I just ran this last week for a new client, so I'm starting the process of building my checklists for all of their servers. So I have this. You can run this against multiple servers, and they'll all appear in the same checklist, right? So this one spreadsheet is just the Windows configuration, and then the second spreadsheet that Kendall provides, and you can it's on GitHub, and there's a slide, a references slide I have at the back of this deck that'll give you the link to go directly there and download it. But does this kind of presentation here look familiar? You're in Configuration Manager. Here's all my SQL Server services, their status, their process ID. What's important, what was their service account, right? Now, this is a demo environment. In your environment, you're hopefully going to have a window, or you're going to have an AD account for your service account, so that you can do things like do the fast file initialization using the perform volume maintenance group policy. But this gives you all of that information about the various services you're running on that server. More information, I'm running a developer edition, and it's Service Pack 1 of SQL 2014. It reiterates what I already know about the Windows system, right? My memory configuration, I'm a bad boy. I didn't properly set my max server memory. That's not the case in my production environments, right? So, but it continues to go on. I've got information about my server logins, what all my logins are. What's really great that I love about this tool is the server roles. I can go to this page. When I've run this in my production environment, I can see who has sysadmin privileges. So this becomes an audit tool for myself as well as a recovery guide. Information on credentials and audits. I'll scroll quickly past this. Like I said, when you download the demos, you'll get this particular set of spreadsheets, so you can explore it at your leisure. But it shows me the databases that I've got on the server, their basic, you know, their recovery level, compatibility level, recovery model, how many data files are there, the data file sizes, and if I go to files, it gives me all of the individual database files, including, way off here at the right, the path to those files, so I know where to put them when I'm restoring, right? The name, the physical name and the path, as well as the database name and the logical name of each of those files. These are important pieces of information when you're trying to recover, right? So I absolutely love, and then if you go even further beyond that, way out at the back, there's information about the agent jobs, the configuration, the jobs that are there, the steps involved, the schedules, any alerts you have set up. Again, these are tools that allow you to know what you need to put back in place when you're rebuilding your servers. So let's go back to our VM, and our Service Pack 1 has been successfully installed, right? So I'm going to change to my work directory, and now I'm going to restore my databases. I'm going to start this script and then explain it to you. Here's the script. It's a PowerShell script that I wrote like 2 weeks ago because I had a Transact SQL script with the exact files I wanted to restore, and I realized that's of no use to you. You have different files, and that set of files is always going to change. So what this script does, assuming you're using Ola Hallengren's maintenance solution, a lot of people are. If where you're storing your database backups is different, then adjust the script. But what this does is I used ADO.NET for all my access, so you don't have to load any DBA Tools module, you don't have to load SQL Server module, you don't have to load SQL PS, you don't have to load anything. It will run natively PowerShell on any version, right? So, but what you do is you pass it, the target server is the name of your server you're rebuilding. The directory, backup directory, is the source of where your backups are. And again, this assumes that it's Ola's, because Ola has a very specific hierarchy of directories that he chose to build. And I tend to use that, so I built this script with that in mind. And so the first thing it does, it checks to see if there's a full backup file for a database. And then, because there may be a directory there and no backup file in there, right? So it checks to see that the backup file is there, and then it takes the most recent full backup and restores it, right? It sets, if the database already exists, which it could, it sets it into single user mode so I can overwrite it with the most recent backup. Then I do the restore from that backup file. I'm just using the ADO.NET execute on query. Then it looks in the differential directory to see if you have any differential backups, because that might be part of your backup strategy. So it pulls the most recent differential backup, if it exists, and restores it with no recovery. Then it goes into the transaction log backup directory, orders those by date, takes the ones that are more recent than the most recent backup you've just restored, either the full or the diff, pulls those transaction logs, puts them in sequence, and then restores them in order. So it does that automatically by discovering what's in those directories for you. And this will be in the download for you. So you don't have to write the script. I've already written it. And then when it's done with all of the restores, it restores with recovery so that database is now available to you, and it sets it back to multi-user so it's available to everybody. And then there's a catch block if anything goes wrong. All right, so if we go back, it says script completed. So now if I open up Management Studio, which got installed because this is SQL 2014, and SQL 2014 installs Management Studio for you, right? Newer versions have different sets of rules, so plan for that. But there's my SQL Server 2014 SP1, and there are all my databases that got restored from the backups from the script I just ran. So there's a couple more steps, but they're fairly minor. If I go into my demos directory, I need to recreate my logins. This is a script that I built from using SP Help Rev Login. I give you a link to SP Help Rev Login at the end. But I've been using that script for many years. It still works. And then you need to relink, because my newly restored server, the logins have different SIDs, security IDs, than the original logins, right? So, change users logins, update 1 from, this is the syntax for this. What this does is it takes the database user, connects it to the login with the same name. So it essentially resolves the SID differences between the two. I've now completed the restoration. This server is back to where it was when I lost it. Wow. We're going to have a lot of time for questions, and I apologize for that. This has gone rather much more quickly than I anticipated. You guys aren't asking questions. All right. SP change user login is going to be phased out.
It's going to be phased out. It's going to be replaced by alter.
Alter. Okay. Yeah. And so again, these particular commands were specific for 2014 SP1. Yeah, there are changes. There are changes as we're going along. The whole thing they announced this morning with accelerated database recovery, that's going to change this whole game, right? So, but what you need to do is you need to build a recovery process that matches what the server configuration you already have. Does that make sense? Now, to run the SQL PowerDoc, it's really pretty simple. Let me go into, I think if I have, let me do that while we're chatting. I'm just trying to find the session that I did. Service broker, find and fix. I don't think. Here, let's do this. Nope. Not there. Pardon me for a moment, but right. Nope, those are. Here we go. So when you download the master, the PowerDoc master, you'll get these files and this modules directory. So I'm going to copy these to my work directory. And this is going to go in my work directory. So these are the files that you'll get with SQL PowerDoc. You take the modules directory that you get, copy that, and place that into in your documents directory. If there doesn't already exist this folder, Windows PowerShell. Create a Windows PowerShell directory in your documents folder, and then paste that modules directory there. Now what I can do, I'm in my work directory, I can say get SQL Server inventory to CLI XML. And what that's going to do is that's going to run the PowerShell script against your target servers. Computer name, here's where you can put in the list of servers. You can do comma separated, or you can put them in the text file and use get content to pull the contents of the text file into a variable and give that variable name here. In my case, WS12 SQL. It's just this one server. My directory path where I want the output to go is C work. And then logging preference, I always pick verbose. That way, if anything goes wrong, I know what to do. And what this does, now this requires local Windows admin on each of the servers where you're collecting the data. And you have to be a member of the sysadmin role on each of the SQL servers where you're collecting the data. Why? Because I'm using Windows Management Instrumentation to get all of the Windows data about those servers, and I'm using the admin role to run DMVs and essentially walking through the whole SMO structure to gather data about the server. So the first thing it's doing, and what this is going to do then, it's going to create, so PowerShell has this really neat feature called CLI XML. It's a special version of an XML type data structure that encapsulates everything about the object that you're using. So you remember PowerShell uses the .NET framework and everything is an object. So all of the properties and all the methods associated with the object are encapsulated in a particular object. And so let's say you've gathered a bunch of stuff and you've got it in this variable, right? If I say export this variable using export CLI XML and export that to a file, and I'm having difficulty with whatever this object is, and I can't quite figure out how to get out of that object what I want out of it, and you're a PowerShell expert and you know exactly how to get that, so I'm going to send you this XML file, this CLI XML file, and you can import that CLI XML file, and now you have that object exactly the way I have it. And you don't have to rerun all the stuff that I did. So what Kendall did was he did that, and we now have in our work directory 2 files. One is our log showing everything that happened. So if anything went wrong, I can go back and troubleshoot to see what happened. But it also has this xml.gz. So what he does is he creates the XML file and then compresses it using newzip. So I then, and I run this at customers all of the time. I take this GZ file and I copy it to my base machine because I don't want to install Excel on that server. So I just put that GZ file here, and then I'm going to open up PowerShell on my base machine, make sure that I have these modules in my own documents. Windows PowerShell. Yep, there they are. Okay, good. I don't have to do anything special there. But I was in this tool, no. I was right here. Okay, so let's go to that directory. I'm going to open up PowerShell. Let's do it with the ISE so I can make this, the letters bigger for you. Because there's a space in the path. Now I run the script convert SQL Server inventory CLI XML to Excel. My from path is right here. Right, this was the one I just ran. My to directory path is, I'm going to put this in just my, just cadmin, just for grins. All right, and then of course logging preference is verbose. Whoa. Okay, that should have worked. Let's try this in a different directory. Cut. Paste. And to path. And logging verbose. And it's still not working. Well,
Maybe because you didn't run it as admin?
no, this part doesn't require that. There's something, Windows. Oh, it's not finding the file. Oh, okay. Here's the fun. Sorry about this. This is just an anomaly with this. But what I needed to do here is you can't use a dot reference for the path. You have to specify the full path. So now if I run it, now it works. So I apologize for that little discovery, but so don't use relative pathing with the script. But now it's converting all of that data that it pulled in the first step. So what I can do is I can run the first step at a client site. I don't need to install Excel or anything there. And I can get that GZ file back. And now I've got the Windows inventory that I showed you before, only this is based on what I just ran now. And similarly, I get the SQL Server inventory like I showed you before, essentially the same thing because it's built based on the same configuration. What I didn't show you earlier was the third piece of what Kendall provided is an assessment spreadsheet that what it does is it takes all of the Windows Server and SQL Server configuration information that the way it's configured and compares that to known best practices and points out where you're not following best practices. And at the end, gives you links to the MSDN articles that explain what those best practices are and why. How awesome is that? Now, as a consultant, this becomes my my target list for the work I need to do. Right? So I've got information on performance, on reliability. You know, my last known good DBC check DB is a little too long, right? I've got my system and user databases on the C drive. That's a no-no, right? Security information, talking about all of the users that have SA, sysadmin role, password expiration isn't enabled, all kinds of things. So this assessment spreadsheet will also help you in your environment. In addition to giving you the inventory, it will give you the ability to go in and improve the performance of your systems. Are there any questions on what I did here? Now, what I did in this PowerShell script is I used, like I said, I used ADO.NET so that you didn't have to install any modules. And then I used T-SQL with either execute non-query, or there's one case where I'm actually using a data reader, because there are two ways of getting data from SQL Server: a data adapter and a data reader. A data adapter essentially gives you an in-memory database in ADO.NET. A data reader just spoon feeds you the data quickly. So if you've got large data sets, you want to use a data reader. If you've got small data sets, you generally can use a data adapter. So, but I've got both in there for you. Any questions on this script? Yes, sir. Yes. Okay, so I haven't done that in this presentation. I haven't restored those because I've got the logins and I've got the agent jobs. I've got those all scripted out to rebuild them rather than restore master and restore MSDB. Okay? So if it's cleaner in your environment to restore master, restore MSDB, then add those steps to your process. Yes. Exactly.
Like in our case, I know you're looking at actual files and directories, whereas we make sure the backups happen of the system databases after the application once we look in MSDB where the files are.
So yeah, so normally when you're restoring, and I'm repeating this for the recording, but normally you'll use the data in MSDB to know where to restore from. And what my solution does is it doesn't rely on that. It just says, what are my files that I have? And then build the restores from those. What are the scripts I have for my agent jobs and my schedules and all the steps involved? Rebuilds from those, as assuming that those master and MSDB databases aren't there. For that reason, because it can be a little tricky to restore master and MSDB. And so I try to keep things as simple as I can. All right? All right. So what you want to make sure you can do is rebuild your server, right? Use the checklist that you've put together for each one of your servers. Follow through. Make sure you know where all of your backup, all your installation media are, and where all of your backup files are. And make sure they're protected, like they're on a USB drive, so that if something hits the network and everything on the network is compromised, you have a place to go. So add to your backup processes a regular copying of those files off to an offline media so you can get those back. Now, one of the challenges that I'm going to have with my new client is getting them off of a third-party, storage-based, backup, taking snapshot type, VM snapshots, and that's their backup. It's like, yeah, no, I can't do a point-in-time recovery from that, right? So you have to understand that you have to establish that RTO and RPO with the business, knowing what the ramifications are, and then practice that. So build your checklist, and then practice with a set of test VMs that hopefully the people who were responsible for setting those up for you, because generally speaking, you don't do that as a DBA, right? So make sure that they can set this stuff up for you so that you can run through the recovery process. There's a thing that we use in acting called sense memory. And it's the same thing I used when I was learning to fly. We practice emergency procedures because when you practice them, you get a sense of what it is you have to do. And if you practice it enough, you become to the point, you get to the point where you know what the next step is. You still use the checklist, but if you miss something on the checklist, there's something in your mind that goes, something ain't right here. What is it? Something ain't right. So let's fix it, right? So that's the sense memory part of this whole process. And that only comes through doing it. Okay? Use the scripts. You notice everything I didn't use a graphical interface to install SQL Server or to install the .NET 3.5 or to install the Service Pack. I used scripts. I'm giving you that script so you can use that as a guide to build your own scripts. One thing I will mention in your configuration.ini, there's a couple things you'll have to change. One of the things you'll have to add is the option that says I accept SQL Server license terms, right? Because it won't actually run that configuration unless that's in there. But you also have to turn on TCP/IP, because by default that's off. Well, okay, by default you can't talk to your server. That's bad, right? So build your scripts and then try them out. Make sure they work. How current are your backups? Are you getting those offline? How often do you test those backups? Because a backup that's not tested is just a bunch of bits on disk, right? Once you test it, then it's a good backup. Where are the installation disks? Do you know where everything is to get you back to the version you're currently running? Do you have a current installation script? You want to build that one for each one of your servers. Do you have your recovery checklist? And I've given you some samples in the download. What order do your databases need to be restored? Right? There's a hierarchy, both of your servers and your databases, that if you don't put them back in the right order, things may not work properly. Right? You might have kind of a parent-child type scenario between different databases or even different servers. What are the most critical servers to your business? Which are the ones you have to get up first so that the business can recover quickly when this happens? You need to document all of this, make sure the business agrees with it, and then practice using that. Right? What order do your servers need to be restored? What about the service accounts? Can you get those back up? Are you using, what kind of service account architecture are you using? And make sure you can restore that and you have the necessary certificates or passwords or hashed passwords or whatever it is you need to make sure that those service accounts are back up and functioning when you recover. What about the network permissions? Right? One of the reasons you don't use the NT service service accounts is because your SQL Server might need to reach across to a different server and place files in a file share someplace, right? You need to make sure that the network permissions that service account requires over there is there. What about linked servers and linked server logins? Have you covered that? Have you documented what linked servers you've got configured, what account they use to connect, and what permissions those accounts require to get the job done? I haven't run into a shop yet that doesn't use linked servers, even though they're slower than molasses, right? They're terrible, but that's the only way people know how to get data across. So there's other ways of doing it, but I'll guarantee you have linked servers. So you want to make sure you cover that, all right? And then practice, practice, practice. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Yes, that's Carnegie Hall from the stage. About a year and a half ago, I got to sing there with the Cleveland Orchestra. I sing with the Cleveland Orchestra Chorus. So we were doing Haydn Oratorio, the Seasons, and that was during rehearsal. I'm not allowed to have my phone on stage during a performance. So, but But you know, you actually go into the Carnegie Hall gift shop, and you can buy bags that say practice, 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 because it's a standard joke. But seriously, it is also how you will be prepared for your emergency, should that occur. Things change. Databases, base sizes change. Question? Okay, and then the question is, with linked servers, you might need to add extra providers like Excel or something else so that the linked server connections actually do work. There's all kinds of things. You know, you can have linked servers to Oracle, and you can have linked servers to PostgreSQL. Yeah, exactly. And it's a very good point. You have to make sure those are covered. Every checklist that you're going to build is going to be custom to you, right? Because your requirements are different than everybody else's requirements in the room. Make sure that your recovery can meet your business RTO and RPO. And how do you ensure that it's going to meet that? By practicing it, because your backups are going to continue to grow. I haven't yet met a backup that shrinks, technically, you know, unless you come up with some magic solution. But generally speaking, your backups just keep getting bigger, and which means it's going to take longer. I'm really excited about using this accelerated data recovery to see what that does for the times. But it's important to know that you can meet those expectations. Okay? So that practice makes sure that those processes that you are going to work in an emergency scenario, and you keep those processes fresh in your mind so you have that sense memory. So when because how many times have you been in a situation where something's broken and the boss or the boss's boss is like, when are you going to fix it? When are you going to fix it? When are you going to fix it? Right? You get that pressure. It's okay, dude, chill. Let me do my job. We'll be done. We'll be fine. If you've practiced, you've got that confidence because you know it's going to be fine. All right. So resources, SQL PowerDoc. There's the link. It's GitHub. In fact, I just talked with Kendall this week or late last week, and he said he's now got to dive in there and make the updates for PowerDoc for SQL 2019. Right? There's some new features he's got to accommodate for it in there. So he will be working on that, but he's made this public. So if you want to help him, ping him. You've got Kendall's contact information. He works for Microsoft now. He'd be more than happy with the help. Glenn Berry, DMV queries. Those DMVs are going to give you back a lot of information, right? What I didn't put in here in the list is Andre Common added some modules to the DBA Tools project that when you run Andre's commandlets that he added to DBA, how many of you guys have heard of DBA Tools? Good, excellent. Chrissy and Rob have done an amazing job, haven't they? And getting the whole community behind the process. Well, Andre is one of the people that contributed to that project, and he created these scripts that when you target a particular server with his scripts, it will go out to Glenn's site, pull in the latest Glenberry DMV scripts, run them, and output them to an Excel file for you. I just used it last week. It's awesome, right? So by all means, use Glenn's scripts and use Andre's DBA Tools extension to get the data, because there's an incredible amount of valuable information in those results. Here's the link to SP Help Rev login, how I recreated the logins. And I used to, when I migrated servers back in the mid-2000s, I used SP Help Rev login all of the time for that purpose. Right? I now used it for the recovery of my test server. But by all means, go to dbatools.io and just start browsing through the wealth of material there to help you manage your systems. All right. Any other questions? Yes? The scripts will work in an always-on environment. So to your question, are the scripts applicable to there are a variety of different always-on solutions, whether it's failover clustering or availability groups. I know that the SQL PowerDoc, for example, identifies the roles in availability groups that each of the servers has. It also, if you're still using database mirroring, it identifies the mirroring pairs so that you have that information. What you need to do is in your checklist and your sets of recovery scripts, you need to do the necessary things to rebuild that. I didn't create any automated way of reading. Thank you, 5 minutes. I didn't create any automated way of rebuilding the creation mechanism. Now, you may find that in DBA tools, by the way. They've done a lot of really good stuff in DBA tools, so explore DBA tools to see if you can create the T-SQL scripts to rebuild your availability groups, for example. That would be a really good start. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
In your experience, what is the most successful way of explaining to system admins and managers that a Veeam backup is not a 100% appropriate for business data?
The question is, in my experience, what is the best way to explain to system administrators and managers that a Veeam snapshot backup is not the most appropriate way to back up a database? And I will tell you that I am having that exact conversation with a client right now. The good news is they're open to my suggestions, and the point that I always make with them is if you can show me a rapid recovery from the Veeam backup or Commvault or whomever it is, right? I'm not picking on Veeam. I'm picking on the technology they're using, because what they tend to focus on is a point in time of the virtual machine and a data deduplication algorithm to minimize the size of the backup that they're creating. And it does a good job of minimizing the size of the backup. What that then does is maximizes the amount of time it takes me to recover from that. And the other problem I have with it is that it doesn't give me a high ability to restore to a specific point in time. Okay, back in 2003, I started a new job and as a DBA, and I started doing my assessment of everything, and I saw that this one major database that the application that the business used didn't have auto update statistics turned on. And I said, well, that's dumb. So I turned it on. And within 5 minutes, I had phone calls. The application was down. Because it was an application that had been written for DBase and migrated to SQL Server by virtue of the Borland database engine. And the Borland database engine broke because of internal metadata conflicts if you turned on auto-update statistics. And I didn't know that. Fortunately, I had a point-in-time backup of just before I made that change, and I was able to recover fairly quickly. I didn't, I didn't do this just blindly and say, well, let's just do this. I did have a recovery point. But it's that point in time. I only lost the couple of minutes between my last transaction log backup of that database and when I made that change, right? So it's the combination of the amount of time it's going to take you to recover, and they really do. The admins really love the data dedupe, but it takes literally at another previous client, a business would have, and they had customers that had ransomware issues, and it would take 6 to 8 hours to get the systems recovered from backups. I'm sorry, if I've got 100 meg or 100 gig database, and it takes 8 hours to get that back because you wanted to use data dedupe, that's not an acceptable business decision. And that's what you have to do. You have to approach it from what's the RTO and RPO that the business will accept, and I'll bet you the solution that you've got in place will not meet that. Is that a reasonable answer? Okay, anybody else? We're right, yes, sir.
Do you have a link to your slide deck?
Do I have a link to my slide deck? It's on the PASS website right now. The slide deck itself, I think, is there, but I'm going to take this, both the slide deck and the demo scripts, and I'm going to upload them either later today or sometime tomorrow, but it'll be before the end of the week.
And also, are you just not familiar that they're doing that?
I haven't found that I can do it in within a reasonable period of time, and it really does have to do with because the way they're deduping is they're building a data dictionary of the values that are in the database. Well, they have to reconstruct that data dictionary before they can recover the database, right? So how much time does that add to the process? I know what SQL Server does with compressed backups, and it's amazing, but it doesn't involve a data dictionary. It's simply taking, doing straight compression, a straight compression algorithm. So if you're using SQL native backups and you're not compressing them, fix that now. It's something you can do, and it's available in pretty much every edition now, right? So compress your backups. It saves disk space. It saves network time. It's a good thing, right? So, all right. Well, we're right at 11:30. So thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate you being here. Please fill out your session evaluations. If there are things that you would like to help me be better, give me comments how I can give this make this a better presentation for you. But I appreciate you being here. Thank you.